Hi there, I'm Christine. I am the product manager at Udacity for in-classroom mentorship.
And hi, I'm Carolyn. I'm leading operations for Classroom Mentorship.
Now you're not going to see us at all through this video, but we'll be the voices behind the presentation, helping you learn about the tool, the student experience, and what you can expect when you become a mentor. So let's dive in. So what do mentors do? For those of you who actually did go through the nanodegree program, you're probably really familiar with the forums, maybe one-on-ones, project reviews, but did you ever wish there was a way to ask a question and immediately without even leaving the classroom? So being able to, in your learning experience, raise your hand and say, hey, I don't understand something. Did you ever wish there was someone to keep you accountable, to check in, to say, I noticed you haven't been online recently. Are you on vacation? How's that going? How's it going for you? And kind of guide you through the nanodegree. That is what in-classroom mentors do. So there's kind of three main points that we are going to ask you to do as an in-classroom mentor. The first is providing on-demand support for students on a day-to-day basis. So this does mean that we expect kind of a daily check-in for you to make sure that your students aren't stuck. Secondly, we want you to keep students accountable with weekly check-ins. This is something that is automated in the product. We'll go through the student experience and you can see what that actually looks like for a student. But we want you to respond to those check-ins and encourage them and let them know, what should they be focusing on for the next week? Are their goals realistic, etc. And then finally, build a relationship with students and guide them through the nanodegree. You have been selected as a mentor because you're an interesting, awesome person, and we want students to get to know you. They're going to have career questions. They're going to have questions about your experience going through interviews. Feel free to share all of that and be more than just someone that's answering technical issues. So before we go into the tool that you'll be using, let's talk a little bit about what the student experience looks like. When they first kind of enter the classroom after they enroll in a nanodegree, if they do have a mentor, this is what they will see. This mentor panel on the right, you see over here, will expand, auto-expand, and they'll be greeted and go through an onboarding process. So the first panel kind of shows them, explains what mentorship is, what a mentor is. We tell them how it works. They'll be able to send you messages and complete weekly check-ins. And then finally, they will get to meet you. So you'll have your avatar, your name, your bio. So this gives them the first context of who you are and how you're going to help them. When they click start chatting, they will also get an automated first message from you. So this is something that in the survey you're currently about to take, we're going to ask you for. This is the very first introduction that they'll have to you, and our recommendation is actually that you ask a question. You kind of spark a conversation with them, saying just, hey, so glad to meet you, looking forward to working with you. While it's very encouraging, it might not be the best way to engage with a student. We've seen a lot of success by asking them, why did you decide to take this nanodegree? What are your goals? What do you want to get out of it? That typically will really get them talking. And that's typically what it will look like when they type back. So this will now walk through kind of the weekly check-ins. Every Thursday, the students will get an email that says they have a check-in available. If they click on the link, they will be taken to their classroom where this same panel kind of turns into a check-in area. If they start their check-in, they're asked essentially two questions. The first is, what did you accomplish in this past week, and what are your goals for the upcoming week? And secondly, are you currently stuck by anything? When they answer those, they will then be instructed to give their mentor, you, a 1 to 5 star rating and the option to leave any qualitative feedback. This will not be something that you see on a per student basis. but we do try to aggregate those numbers for you. So if you have 20 students, we try to give you an average of what their ratings are over a week or over a month, and let you know how you're doing based on that. So this won't go directly to you. This is kind of filtered back to our internal team, and we'll take a look at it. And once they complete that, the weekly check-in is populated in that same chat panel that they're able to send you a message in. We do expect that when you get this weekly check-in, you respond to it the same way that you would a message that they send. And we'll go through some of the best practices of how to respond to those later in the presentation. And finally, we're going to walk through the tool that we have built for you yourselves to work and interface with your students. So this is the mentorship tool. You will soon, in a week or so, get an email instructing you how to get here. But it's a pretty straightforward view. For any nanodegrees that you are mentoring, you'll be able to select different ones on the side. You can see this particular mentor only has one nanodegree. If you have multiple, there will be more stacked here. And then all of the students that you're currently mentoring for that nanodegree are available on a list to the left. When you get a missed message from a student, not only do you get an email notification 2 hours after the message is sent, and we may tweak this timing based on feedback from mentors, but you also get a notification here in your panel. If you have the browser open, you'll also get a browser notification for it. And this should look pretty familiar. This is kind of the exact UI that the students have. It's a very simple chat interface. What is interesting about it for mentors is you can also attach images. So if a student is having trouble finding something, you can take a screenshot, share it with them. That's what it looks like. You can upload a file or drag and drop. You also here you get read receipts. So students don't have read receipts. They're not able to see when you have read a message, but you can see when they have read a message. So this kind of helps context clue-wise if you are trying to engage with a student who maybe hasn't been active recently. You'll be able to say or see if they have not read your message, and maybe don't send them as many until they have read your existing ones. What is most exciting for me about this dashboard, and I've actually used it myself as a mentor, is this progress panel up here. So if you click that and expand it, you get all of this rich detail about the student. So you can see when their last visit was, how long they've been enrolled in the nanodegree, and then if you go in and click on these kind of buttons right here, you can see what courses in the nanodegree they have completed, that they've started. This is a great way to just track progress and understand where your student is. So if you see maybe that they're on a testing lesson and they've been there for a few days, reaching out and not just saying hey, are you stuck, but saying hey, I see that you're currently tackling the testing suite. I had a particularly difficult time with that. Here are some tips that I have. It makes it much more of a white glove, rich experience than just blindly reaching out. So we want you to use this to your full advantage, and if there's anything that you think might help you be a better mentor, definitely filter that back up to us, because we want to build this out to make it as useful as possible to you. So with that, that's the tool that you're going to be able to have, but there are kind of best practices for how to actually engage with students through this tool. The first is students can reach out whenever they feel stuck. So you can expect to receive questions at any time. We typically ask mentors to check in once or twice a day. And this can be, you're on your lunch break, you're at home watching the latest episode of Westworld, to just open up that dashboard, see if there's anything that you need to check in on. We also do have a mobile app for mentors, so you can have your dashboard on the go. With email notifications, you'll also, be able to know when a student does message you. And then after a student reaches out, we require that you respond within 12 hours. But you'll notice that students will factor the overall response times into their ratings. This is not a requirement. We're not saying like be online at all times, but typically the mentors that do have, really stellar 4.7 and above ratings typically answer within a few hours. And then when answering incoming questions, we really want you to not give a direct answer unless a student gives an explanation of what they've tried so far. Like, have they checked Stack Overflow? Have they read the documentation? Kindly ask them if they've looked into these types of resources if they haven't really done that themselves. There's a really fine line here. If a student writes in and they seem to have a good grasp of the question, and you just say, hey, have you checked Stack Overflow? That seems like you're not really sure what the problem is or how to help them. But instead saying, oh, hey, I found this Stack Overflow link that kind of addresses the issue. What do you think? That way it seems more of like a partnership and a back and forth rather than you just pushing them away to find out and flounder a little bit on their own. What we want to avoid, though, is a student saying, like, hey, I don't understand this, and you saying, here's the code that you need to write. Just because pedagogically that might not lead them to the best understanding of the process. And there we go. If they're having trouble, find a resource that will directly address their problem. After that, it's probably time to, give them a direct answer that can help them. If the student asks a question specifically about your Udacity experience, your professional background, your career aspirations, you can feel free to answer that freely and as openly as you want. And I think that's actually a great way for you and your student to bond and get to know each other and develop, a deeper relationship. So the second way to engage with your students is actually through the weekly check-ins. So students will be asked to set goals for the next week as well as reflect on how they did on last week's goals. Sometimes, and by sometimes I mean often, students aren't going to set goals that are achievable and kind of outlined in a concrete fashion. So in order to make sure that your students have the best chance at achieving their goals, we kind of have this model that we call a SMART goals model. So SMART stands for specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound. So if a student doesn't give you a SMART goal, there are numerous ways that you can guide them to one. So one thing that we see a lot is a student may say that their goal is to learn Android development. So that's a great goal. That's, potentially achievable and realistic, but it's not time-bound or specific or measurable. So when do they want to, by what day do they want to learn Android development? How are they going to do it? How will they know whether or not they've achieved it? So if that's kind of the answer that you get, maybe you respond in a way where you say, oh, how do you intend to learn Android development this week? What do you want to accomplish this week in that quest? So making sure that you focus kind of on this weekly time frame, because that's the cadence of those check-ins, and that you hone in on exactly what the goal will be in a SMART goal model. And then lastly, if a student has completed their last week's goals, you might get check-ins where students are like, everything's great, I'm on track, here's what I want to do, here's what I did last week, and you don't feel like there's any feedback that you really need to offer. Congratulations is a perfectly acceptable response to a check-in. Asking them, how it felt to actually get things done, patting them on the back a little bit, all of those things kind of help with their momentum forward and get them excited about learning at Udacity. So in both of these two engagement models, one through the day-to-day chat and one then weekly check-ins, we really encourage proactive engagement. So unlike our forums, you as a mentor are able to directly engage with students proactively, not just reactively. So if a student misses a check-in, you should reach out and say, I noticed you didn't check in this week. You can still share some goals with me. How are things going? If you respond to a student and don't hear back from them, it's a good idea to reach out again and make sure the problem is solved. And if a student hasn't reached out to ask a question over a week, or you notice in your dashboard that they haven't logged in a few days, it's a good idea to actually check on them and make sure they're on track to meet their goals. I'm actually currently enrolled in the self-driving car nano degree, and I have a mentor, and that mentor, you know, wished me a happy new year on January 1st. He wrote like, oh, like, Happy New Year, what's your New Year's resolution? Is completing this lesson one of them, which I thought was just a very like real, interesting way of reaching out, getting me back you know, into my classroom and getting me excited about learning again. So we really encourage you to do this as you see fit. That also lends itself a little bit to the payment information, which maybe Carolyn wants to walk through.
Okay, we measure how active your students were per week. So if one of your students is a very active student, so this means that they sent you more than 10 messages in a week, then you will receive $15 per week for this particular student. And so this means if you have 15 very active students, you can earn $900 per month. If a student is kind of medium active, and they will send you between 1 and 10 messages per week, so you will receive $10 for this week for this student. And if one of your students isn't active at all and you don't get any messages, you won't be paid for this student, and all of the payments accumulate to a monthly paycheck that you will receive in the middle of the month for the previous month.
So that means, I guess that kind of goes to one of the reasons why we want mentors to be proactive, is because if you have 10 students and they're not actively reaching out to you, there's a financial kind of benefit for you checking in on them and asking how things are going. Because if you can convert one student from sending no messages in a week to sending one message in a week, your paycheck goes from $0 that week to 10 for that student. So that's kind of the idea around being proactive. Right. So next steps, you've completed watching this training video. Fill out all the information below in this survey, and within the next week or so, you'll hear from someone at Udacity about your application and get an email of how to access the mentor dashboard, how to start supporting your students, what the timeline is for that. If you have any questions, I guess you can reach out to your nano degree services lead, so the person that you've been working with, to actually get this link, this training video, or you can always email mentorship-support@udacity.com.
Yay.
That's it. Awesome. Thanks, guys.